Hello, and welcome to Thriving Kids, the podcast from the Child Mind Institute. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Anderson. In today's episode, we're talking about how to help kids and teens build positive, healthy friendships. Because for many parents, supporting social development can feel confusing, especially when your child struggles to connect with peers, has trouble communicating their needs, or just isn't sure how to find their people. To help us break this down, I'm joined by Dr. Mandy Silverman, a clinical psychologist and a member of our Clinical Advisory Council here at the Child Mind Institute. Dr. Silverman specializes in ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, anxiety, and other emotional and behavioral challenges. And she brings years of experience helping kids build confidence, communication skills, and real relationships. Welcome, Dr. Silverman.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I was going to say, your intro doesn't even say, and formerly an illustrious staff member and senior director at the Child Mind Institute. Over the next 30 minutes, Dr. Silverman and I will break down how to create opportunities for social connection, how to model and teach communication and boundary setting, and how to support your child in navigating the ups and downs of friendship without jumping in to solve everything for them. Let's get into it. So Mandy, given your massive level of expertise in fostering youth friendships across all kinds of different, areas, what do you think are the biggest concerns parents come to you with when they're worried their child might not have friends, be able to make friends, have the right friends, that kind of thing?
I think parents immediately jump to the future. What does this mean about my child in the long run? Will he or she be able to get and keep a job? Will they be able to find a partner and get married? They immediately go down the rabbit hole. And I think it's common. And also because there's chatter out there about our social relationships really have an impact on us more broadly. So everyone's even more in tune to it.
Yeah.
So it's something that comes up all the time.
I think also, given the era that we're in, what would you say are some of the kind of modern, reasons why parents might say, I'm worried that my child is not developing relationships in real life?
Oh, well, screens
Yeah.
in all ways and shapes and forms.
Yeah.
And I think that we've strayed from the 80s and 90s parenting where kids go outside and play with their friends in the neighborhood and come back in when it's time for dinner.
Yeah.
Things have really kind of evolved from that. And parents are now curating their children's social lives, and they're way more involved than they were maybe in years past.
So if we take, the fact that we've got millennial parents raised on the 80s and 90s model, parenting digital age kids, let's start off with just a kind of normalizing question. What do we think are some of the normal ups and downs of friendship and relationship growth for kids from say, elementary school years up through adolescence?
Well, I think there's the first step of making friendships, initiating friendships, and then there's the huge task of maintaining them and understanding what it means to maintain a friendship, that you could have a bad moment or a bad week or a bad month with that person, but it doesn't mean you're not friends anymore. Right. You may have a break and then be friends with them next year. So I think it's sweating the small stuff and thinking it's really big has become a really big theme lately.
What kind of small stuff do you feel like parents are really sweating?
How many play dates? Who's getting invited to what play date? Who's getting invited to what birthday party?
Yeah.
And what does that translate to? And then they quickly go down the rabbit hole of the future, meaning not in the next year, but in the next 5 or 10.
Well, I find that's, especially having my wife and I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Same.
I know you also have kids of the same age.
Yes.
And, I think it's also going back to the notion of the digital age. We can see party invites. Mm-hmm. We can see where people are. Mm-hmm. We can see messages that are being exchanged across parental forums.
Yes.
In the same way that, we can expect that kids of a certain age might be online.
Totally.
We're also expecting that at some level we have more knowledge. I feel like I didn't know so much during the summers when I was a kid.
Right.
Which birthday parties I wasn't invited to.
There was no FOMO.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yep.
I knew what my friends' birthday parties were, but I didn't necessarily know everyone in my class and what their birthday party might have been.
Totally. 100%.
So, I feel like parents are coming in with a lot more knowledge of those things.
And in this case, less is more.
Yeah.
Knowing less is better.
Right.
Focusing on what you can control, what your circle is and what your child's immediate circle is, and still thinking about building it, but not feeling like you have to be friends with everyone and anyone and having, big blowout party kind of play dates all the time.
Totally. So what do we think, just like on a level of facilitating healthy development? Like, what does a kid need in terms of friendships over the course of development?
Good question. So I think the first step would be that parents have to determine what their values are as individuals. And then if it's a co-parenting or two-parent household, coming together and deciding if your values are aligned. Because anybody who's married with children or who has children knows that once you throw children into the mix, everything that you assume you know about yourself can kind of change, especially if you're parenting with someone else. So anchoring into yourself, anchoring into your partner, making sure that you have similar values that you can then teach your children as it relates to meeting people, making friendships, maintaining those friendships, and getting very specific in your language.
So there's a distinction between values and behaviors.
Yeah.
What are some of the values you see parents focus on in terms of how they teach their kids to have relationships?
So, everybody's different, and most people assume that everybody has the same values, and they don't.
Yeah.
So everyone would assume that they want their friends to be inclusive when they're making friends. But not everybody wants that. Some people want their friends to gravitate toward kids who are sportier or who are artsy or, fill in the blank. So those fall into more of the values-based elements here. And then there's behaviors, having kids choose the child who runs up to them and is like, hey, want to play? They may be coaching their kids to befriend the kids who are friendly or silly or smart, right? And those are more behaviorally based reasons.
Absolutely. So the parents are thinking about these sorts of things they're hoping that their kids seek out in relationships. How much control do parents really have about the types of kids that their kid seeks out?
I think that it's an inverse relationship. So parents have the most control the younger their kids are, like with many things.
Absolutely.
And then as our kids creep along and suddenly shock us with how much older and taller and precocious they are, we have less and less control, and they will be seeking out those relationships when you think about when they're 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 and into adolescence. So when kids are preschool age and, elementary school age, that's really the time that parents have the most control because they're creating the play dates, scheduling the birthday parties, planning the sleepovers if they choose to do that.
So let's take a zone we know well, both from our patients and at the same time our own children. 6-year-old kid, we're talking like first grade age range, parent comes into your office and says, I am worried that my child doesn't have, enough friendships or the kind of quality friendships that I would hope for them. What are you looking for? What are you assessing for? What are you coaching on?
So the questions that I'll ask usually, number one, and a lot of us ask this in the field, does your child have a best friend? Or a really close friend? Okay, who? How long have they known each other? What do they do together? After that, do they have other close friends? Would you say they have a friend group? How many are in that group? Who do they come home from school talking about? And if there is really a paucity of names, like if there's really no names that come up, that's when I'm concerned. But there's also a myth out there that the more the merrier. Some kids are really fulfilled with 1 to 3 friendships. And having a really small birthday party with 3 friends at a movie and then going out to dinner. It doesn't have to be a 30-kid birthday party at, fill in the blank, bowling or whatever. So it's...
Well, I think there's often a worry as well that if a kid doesn't have enough backups, that maybe that friend might, move to another state, or maybe that friend would decide to be better friends with Brett or with Megan. And so for that reason, parents want to make sure to diversify a little bit, and they're worried for their kid.
But it's still quality over quantity. I think with everything, we all want to grow, no matter what, in what context. So making more friends is always good, but we want to take the pressure out of it. And thinking that you're only successful socially if you have a room full of people that are your friends or your close friends.
So before we delve into how you coach parents, if their answers to all those questions are no, do you think there's any difference in terms of especially at those early ages, boys' social networks versus girls' social networks?
The gender question. So I think depending on which community you live in and what kind of school your child attends, I would say sometimes. And then there are other communities and schools where the boy-girl rules are kind of out the window.
I think I like your answer because it's suggesting that like we shouldn't just assume that there's going to be these norms where like boys are going to be friends with boys, girls are going to be friends with girls, but that it depends kind of on like how much the community focuses on,
And that goes to values, right? Because
Yeah.
your values often lead you to the community where you live.
Yeah.
But, I remember when my kids were younger, I was of the thought, that we're modern parents.
Yeah.
And they're going to befriend whomever they want.
Right.
Boy, girl. And then I would get feedback like, oh, why would your daughter go to a boy's birthday party? Like all the girls are together. So then
Yep.
sometimes I'm, met with like the old school way and
Right.
it surprises me. But
Well, I like to think also of these like moments. Like I feel like there was one moment I was having a discussion with my son when he was this age, and he really wanted to join the Taylor Swift club in school. But at the same time, his two besties, and granted, they were besties who believed they exerted a large level of influence over the rest of his existence, were like, you can't join that. It's only girls. And like we had a long talk about how like I didn't think that his two closest friends were going to abandon him because they all share massive like football fandom together. If he becomes a Taylor Swift club member, but that he can probably walk across these two groups. And if I look 3 years on at his birthday party list, like the top kids are still those kids, plus a couple kids he met in Taylor Swift group,
Right.
or Taylor Swift
Adding.
club,
Right. Growing.
and it worked out.
Yeah.
Which I realize people might be listening to this podcast, by the way, 20 years in the future, and be like, I don't know, Taylor Swift isn't as much of a topical reference anymore.
Right. We're dating
That kind of
ourselves
stuff.
right now.
Exactly.
In this
But we
moment,
could-
yes.
Right. That's it. But okay. So then getting back to this idea that like, okay, parent comes in and they say, you ask those questions and they say, I don't really hear a kid's name frequently. I feel like it's like a merry-go-round of like kids that he might have like a contact with. There's not someone who we see for play dates. We don't get invitations to a lot of things. Like, how do you go about kind of building up a kid's social world in that event?
So, believe it or not, the first thing that I have families do is have a conversation with their child about, do you know the names of your classmates in your class?
Yeah.
Most of the time, they will say no.
Yeah.
So, so the first step is, okay, when you come home today, I want you to tell me the names of 2 classmates that you talked to,
Yeah.
that you played with, that you stood in line with.
Yeah.
And then we build from there. So we take very, very small steps.
Right.
And then, when they come home and they say, I played with A and B.
Right.
And we'll say, okay, what do you know about them? I didn't really ask them any questions. I played Legos. Okay, what color shirt were they wearing? Was there
Right.
anything on their shirt? Using context clues.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he was wearing a Mets shirt. Ask him about the Mets game tomorrow, right? So
Right.
very gradually building information to then start on small talk to then eventually getting to a play date.
Right. So, I mean, it's for those of you who are listening to this, this is like, the method underlying this is you can see kind of the beauty of you doing it in small steps, not saying to a parent, I'm going to promise you that your child is a best friend tomorrow.
Correct.
I'm going to start by familiarity.
Yep.
I'm then going to find these common areas of interest and overlap.
Yep.
And then what would you say is the jump from common interest to play date? In the sense of like, when do you feel like a kid is ready now to like take that next step?
So once they're starting to talk about common interests and we see enthusiasm or excitement,
Yeah.
that's when either if they're in session with me or they're talking to their parent, one of us will say, well, do you want to play date?
Right.
And especially if they're on the younger side,
Right.
then you can either look up the parents' information on the directory in school, or you can bump into them at pickup, or
Bump.
like hello.
We're doing quotation marks, Aaron. There,
Yes,
right? Exactly.
yes.
You're not necessarily to bump. You can be waiting and
Yep.
stalking
Hello,
outside the school. Oh my
hello,
God!
Are you so and so's
Right.
parent?
You are
So-and-so?
Taylor's dad. Oh my gosh!
We've heard so many great
Exactly.
things. Does he want to come over for pizza tomorrow?
Yes.
Right. So make it
So wait,
seem
now
organic.
now the play date.
Yeah.
So now you got the play date, and what I noticed just there was you're structuring a little bit. What are you thinking about when you talk about these play dates?
You have to have a plan.
Yeah.
Anybody who goes into a play date thinking they're just going to run off and it's going to be
Exactly.
unicorns
Your
and
house is going to
rainbows,
get destroyed, even if your kid does have good
your
friends.
house is going to get
Yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah.
Someone's going to say they're bored,
Yep.
and there could be a fight,
Yep.
and you have to know that none of those are crises, and
Right.
you have to be involved.
There's a reason why summer camps, after school programs, and schools have schedules.
Correct.
Like when you do the play date, and it can be a loose schedule. It can just be like, you have a choice of these few things, and we're going to eat at this time, and you're going home at this time.
Correct.
Like, we know that those things are happening.
Correct.
Okay, so flipping to a little bit later in development.
Yes.
We get kids in middle school where parents are worried, like, okay, I believe they have friends, but a lot of their friends are like people they play video games with,
Yes.
or they're asking if they can be chatting with them online, or they're asking me for a phone, or they're saying their friends are playing video games together and so they need to have access. And I'm worried, like, how much should I let them do the screen-based stuff because I'm worried that they'll get excluded? And how much, by the way, this is completely questions I've been asked in recent sessions, and how much should I be like focusing on IRL relationships?
I'm nodding my head like crazy
exactly,
because this is what I talk about with the parents of, and the population that I work with. As you mentioned in my bio, I work with neurodivergent folks, right? So
absolutely.
teens into young adult, way into young adulthood.
Right.
Parents are asking, he has, they'll say, he has so many friends. He's on his iPad all day long, talking to people and laughing.
Totally.
But it kills me that he doesn't have more IRL. Right. That's what parents are saying.
Yes,
they're using the acronym.
Yes.
He doesn't have enough
Which
IRL.
itself is dated for the current generation, but we can use it because we feel a little cool as millennials.
I feel so cool, not just a little cool.
Okay, good.
And so I do think that for us as parents, we have to kind of shift a little bit and understand that screens of all different kinds, they are not only the now, but the way of the future. And people will be socializing on them more than what we're used to.
Right. And there's vibrant social environments in them.
Completely.
Like, kids learn a whole social milieu through a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we have to remember that we had a pandemic in 2020 and none of us had a choice. We all had to socialize through electronics. So
the yes and so far for you is we're not saying distance yourself from all things, virtual.
Nope.
And also.
Right. So I think that the way you want to think about IRL and online relationships is kind of like taking a vitamin. Toxic in large quantities, but if you take them in moderation, they're good for you. Right. So a good blend of both is helpful. For most kids and parents, there's a little bit more concentration or focus on the IRL stuff because that's just harder the way our lifestyles are. But I would say a blend. And there's really no wrong combination if the child is happy.
So this is where I feel like, okay, we're looking at the intersection of my kid says they really like these relationships they have virtually. At the same time, they tell me my friends don't get together like randomly in real life. And I also know their school has sports teams, music stuff, clubs, there's camps I can send them to, like all that kind of stuff. What's your suggestion as to how you get them into the real life stuff?
It's my favorite question.
Oh, good. Okay.
And I always start this with, I don't care if the kid doesn't like it or your kiddo doesn't like that. And I say that to the parent. I'm saying this with love.
Yeah.
And I don't care if this is not going to be exciting to him or her.
Yes.
You have to get them in after school activities. You have to get them into camps. There's always a lot of frustration and ambivalence. Or anticipatory anxiety. We all know that in most cases, once you get them in, they'll be happy, at least to some extent. But get them in even if they're not demonstrating an interest to get more in-person interaction.
I always think of it like, there are the families where I have to like look at a maximum number of activities, where I have to say like, look, your kid is way overscheduled.
Right, that too. That's the flip side.
And this is actually making them unhappy.
Yes.
But this balance of, we want our kids to be happy with the friendships they have, the activities they're in, what they're invested in life, while also giving them a little bit of diversity, a little bit of a growing edge. And it's okay to say, I know your kid loves the contacts they have online, and also I want them to, focus, even if they say it's uncomfortable, or even if they say I don't want to do it, on like a real life activity of some kind.
Yeah. And novelty in any sense is good for our brains, whether we're 6, whether we're 16, or we're 66. So we don't want our kids getting too comfortable. And I do think that's an element of modern parenting, that we want our kids to feel comfortable and happy all the time.
Right.
And that's not necessarily it's not actually good for them. We want them to be put in novel situations where they're like, I don't like this, or what's my next step? So that maybe the next day they feel more successful and they're like, wow, I can do hard things. We want to build resiliency in that way.
And part of what I'm often thinking about with the digital world is that the digital world has the capability of providing you only with people and kind of, thinking patterns that you agree with.
Echo chamber.
Absolutely. That are just like you. If we're going to be growing, like, I want kids to have the kids they feel comfortable with.
Yes.
Like, if this kid is saying like, oh yeah, my friends and I love playing this video game together, linked, Saturday nights,
Yep.
great. And also, joining the school ping pong team or playing, I'm trying to think of like a different kind of club at school that I think sounds cool, but
robotics.
There we go, robotics. Okay, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or like doing a robotics thing, like, makes it so I meet other kids. Like that forces you to think maybe I'll develop other relationships.
Exactly.
somewhere.
I just enrolled my 6-year-old in her last after-school activities thing. I enrolled her in a circuits club where they like played with electricity, and she was hysterical.
Yes.
And she got through it and felt good about herself.
Well,
and I didn't feel bad. And everyone else at pickup thought I was a monster for making her do it.
Well, and how long did the hysteria last as other people watched you as the psychologist parent dropping off your kid? How long are we talking?
I mean, so I saw her at pickup because she'd go straight from after school. But like, she'd cry the whole way into the car. And I would be like, you're good. I'm so glad you did that. Let's go home and have a snack. And everyone else was like, child psychologist, should I refer my friend to her or not? Not sure, you know?
So I like this as a final question of like, what's one recent example in which you knew that there was something that was good for your child on social relationships and you kind of nudged them in that space? Because I gave the example earlier of like getting my son into Taylor Swift Club where like he really wanted to join. It wasn't hard. I had to get him past his own internal friction to get him to that place. But like, to be clear, between our two kids, my daughter's a joiner. She will do anything. She has 3
like
sports. She has clubs. She has all that stuff. She's like, can I do something else? And we're like, no, honey. Like, at times you have to rest or be bored or be quiet.
Same as my second born. Same.
Absolutely. My son, on the other hand, is like, can we just stay home? Can we just stay home and chill and do that kind of stuff? And we have to be like, no.
Right.
Like, you
Get
have
out
to
there.
have one activity.
Get out there. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So do you have, it sounds like we both have a similar, like, discerning, like, profiles.
Birth order's real.
Right, exactly. So then what's one moment, like, it sounds like this was one where with the coding thing, where you made her hysterical.
Circuits,
What's another that you could think of?
So my oldest is a theater kid. She knew it very early on in her life because I was a theater kid. So, genetics or environment or both, right?
Sure.
And so she's been immersed in her theater
other
company.
passions. Theater. You were going to be an interior designer if you weren't a psychologist.
You remember
got a lot
that
of stuff.
from a long time ago. Pillows. I like throw pillows. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Okay, anyway. Sorry, back to your dog. Yes.
So she was immersed in theater, and my husband was a soccer player and insisted that she do rec league soccer and rec league softball.
Yep.
And she was like, I don't want to do that. I hate sports. And I was like cheering in the background silently, And my husband was like, this is compromise in marriage. Our daughters are going to be well-rounded, so we could do all the theater, but she's doing sports. Long story short, she's excelled in soccer.
Yeah.
And just recently we heard she's at sleepaway camp, and she was the only one in her group that scored a goal that day. And she's like, I love soccer.
That is
and
awesome.
So if I went with my natural instinct in that moment, I would have done a disservice to her. And props to my husband. Sorry, honey, you were right. Doing the hard stuff is really good.
Yeah. So our policy that this makes me think of, because I'm trying to think of now an example where my wife was right. Because I'm like, if you're going to tell Aaron that he was right, I've got to tell Dylan that she was right.
We need something
we gotta keep the equality.
Yeah.
But I will just end with saying that like there's, she made a rule about birthday parties early on in our kid's life that at first I was like, what? And she was like, if we get invited to a birthday party and we are in town, we go. Like, we don't go to swim lessons. We don't go to other things.
I love that rule.
We go to the birthday party.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was like, she framed it to our kids as like, how would you feel? Like a very theory of mind thing that you might like if you invited people to your birthday party and people didn't show up.
Yeah.
It also was a social anxiety exposure because both of our kids were massively socially anxious when they were younger and would
Dylan knows
cry
what
and
she's
not
doing.
join anybody in a birthday party. And so like we had so many birthday parties where our kid would be there for an hour and 50 minutes and like join the other kids only at like an hour and 45 minutes in and then report when they got home to the other parent that it was amazing and that they had pizza and that like the birthday party was really great while the other parent looked like they were coming back from war. and it was like we did that so many times and I kept and today like they walk into birthday parties and are like bye, like see ya, like that kind of stuff. We're not at like drop and go yet, but like we're getting close.
You're getting there.
But I just think back and I'm like, I would have accommodated the heck out of this.
Right.
And like we would have done so many fewer birthday parties and Dylan, you were right.
Right. So you would have
yeah.
avoided birthday parties. I would have banned soccer.
Right.
And we're a happier
we're
family because we
psychologists.
we listen to our spouses and
other people to do exposures all the time.
Correct.
But really, this is about what great spouses we are.
Right. Do as I
That's
say,
it.
not as I do.
Right.
Yeah.
This is absolutely. Yeah. But let's highlight though. We listen to our spouses.
Right, because we're really good at marriage.
That's it.
Yeah.
That should be what people take home with them. And that concludes our podcast on positive relationships across the lifespan.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mandy Silverman, for speaking with us about this. Folks, you can find in the show notes a lot of links to Child Mind Institute resources on building positive friendships, including references in our Positive Parenting Thriving Kids series to videos that we've made on this subject that are great for parents and across age groups, including even for pre-K kids. We talk about how to build social skills using a whimsical world of hedgehogs. So
Awesome.
Again, lots of that in the show notes. And undoubtedly, we have lots more to talk about this in future podcast episodes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks again to Dr. Mandy Silverman for joining me today. I really appreciated her insights on how we can help kids build strong, healthy friendships, and how we as parents can model and support those skills in everyday life. It's not always easy, but it's one of the most important things we can do to help kids thrive. Before we go, I want to mention something we're really proud of at the Child Mind Institute. We have thousands of free resources to support children's mental health, and one group of those is called the Thriving Kids Projects. There's Positive Parenting Thriving Kids, which is designed specifically for parents and caregivers, with practical, evidence-based information and skills to address your most common parenting challenges. And actually, this podcast is a spin-off of that program. It's the Frasier to its Cheers, or for me as a millennial, more the Better Call Saul to its Breaking Bad, if you will. We also have a sister series called Healthy Minds, Thriving Kids, which gives young people practical tools to build emotional skills, manage stress, and feel more confident, no matter their age. If you've got a high schooler, middle schooler, or elementary school student, we've got short videos for them on understanding feelings, understanding thoughts, building relaxation skills, managing intense emotions, and mindfulness, all tailored to their age group. And if you have a preschooler, we have something truly magical, an Emmy and Webby-nominated children's show set in mythical Hedgehog Land. It stars an ensemble of forest friends who help young kids understand their feelings, use their words, work through big emotions, and be brave, even when they're scared or nervous about trying something new. And to bring it all back to this podcast, the final episode of Hedgehog Land is actually called Being a Good Friend. In it, the hedgehogs teach kids how listening, sharing, and taking turns can help build strong friendships. You can picture Dr. Silverman and me in that hedgehog land. It explains so much of what we talked about today in a developmentally appropriate, engaging way. The full series is streaming on YouTube, or you can watch it on childmind.org, and of course, you can find all the links in our show notes. Every episode of Hedgehog Land features original music by the incredible band Lake Street Dive, and I'll hand it over to them now to play us out. See you next time.
If you're ever feeling sad as one, you can grab a friend and have more fun. Good friends make the world go round. Good friends make a hedgehog town. If you ever feel like you're in a fog, grab the hand of another hedgehog. Helping, sharing, taking turns, being friends with all the forest ferns. It's always good to be a good friend, because being a good friend is great. It's always good to be a good friend, because being a good friend is great. You can take your turn, you can try to learn, you can help out, you don't need to shout. Listening and helping with leaf pile raking, sharing and waiting for your turn in taking. It's always good to be a good friend,
end of this year's Forest Festival. I hope you had fun. I know I did. We'll have to come back and visit our friends in Hedgehogland again soon. Until then, don't forget to be a good friend. This is Explorer Eleanor Woods saying goodbye for now, and I'll see you next time.